You're listening to the Echo Ratings Eventing podcast, the show with a light-hearted look at the eventing world, all of the big event previews, reviews, and special guests, and of course, backed up with all of the key Echo Ratings stats. Welcome to the Echo Ratings Eventing podcast.
Hello and welcome to the first podcast called The Hold Box, hosted by myself, Spike Milligan, an equine vet based in Lambourne at Lambourne Equine Vets. And this podcast and this series is really going to be looking at the marrying a veterinary aspect onto various aspects of managing sports horses, but also having regular guests that will have the horsemanship side. And hopefully we can demystify and debunk some of the stuff that's out there that can be quite confusing for people, and that can be at all different levels. So for this very first podcast, I have got my great friend Sam Watson to come in. Good evening, Sam.
Evening, Spike. It sounds like it's going to be way above my pay grade. It sounds thoroughly interesting and deep, but no, I think it's a fascinating area. I think it's the fundamental basics of the whole thing, isn't it? Is keeping these horses on the road and managing their well-being, which has many aspects. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to hearing from you as well. You talk a lot of sense. It is like, watching their friend doing something for the first time. I'm trying to keep it clean. And when I came on, you are under the guise of Nicole Brown, and I thought Spike Milligan is late for his own first podcast, but you've just taken over her.
Well, I've very kindly had the support and advice from the wonderful Nicole Brown about how to do the hosting. I don't think I've quite got her, her tone of how she introduces everything, but we'll give it a go and hopefully it'll work out well. So thanks, Sam, for joining me on this first one. And what we're going to talk about here this evening is fitness and fitness for competition. And that can be through all aspects of sports horses and competition horses. And we're probably going to touch mostly on eventing, where true fitness in the truest sense of the word is most applicable, rather than the pure show jumping and dressage. But I think it's all applicable to all levels of the sport. I wanted to sort of start, Sam, by what do you see as, if I talk about fitness, what do you see that as?
As Darren will go on about from an equine ratings point of view, I do always like to start with why. So why do I want my horse fit? For me, it's why I am doing this and managing this fitness program. It's so I can complete a competition without injury to the standard required. So I want to go clear inside the time. And if it's a long format event like badminton, pinnacle of the sport, or Burley, that's over quite a distance, over sort of 4 miles, about 11 minutes, over 11 minutes of jumping and galloping at a decent speed. And they've got to come out and show jump the next day as well. So I need fuel for that. Like it's about energy, but it's also about injury prevention. So, that is the why. I want to complete it to the standard without injury. So that's what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's a hugely important point, and probably missed in general. The reason why we want fit horses that can find the extremes of the test that they're going under is that they're happy and healthy and comfortable doing it and sound afterwards. And I always talk about the same as you. Why do we want a fit horse? Well, they only need to be fit enough to do the job we want them to do, but equally they need to be able to be in one piece at the end of it. Otherwise you do end up in the whole box on a Sunday morning if you haven't got, the horse fit and recovering well, which is another really important thing. That recovery and to be ready to go again on a Sunday at a 3-day event is so important. So yeah, I would agree, Sam. I mean, that even from my real vetty point of view, those 2 points: achieving an optimum performance, but also being sound, comfortable, and in the sort of optimal condition to do the last part of the challenge, which is the Sunday.
I've got a confession, Spike. I have in my first ever championship, Fontainebleau 2009. It was with the great horse Rare Bushman, and I suppose when a a young sort of 22, 21-year-old Irishman makes their senior debut. You know, they think they're cock of the walk. Well, I certainly did. So walking around, shades on, you know, the Team Ireland jacket on, going down to my first trot up. And it's Wednesday, you know, I haven't had to do dressage yet and embarrass myself. And I'm all very confident. But you've seen George, which is Bushman's stable name. He was never really... There was never a day in his life when you trot him up and you go, yep, happy with that, unless you knew him really, really well. Because anyone who was seeing him for the first time would be like, can we just see that again? And that was exactly what the ground jury did at my first ever Europeans. And I was sent to the whole box. That was it. And I tell you what, that was a heart-raising moment. But that is a big, big part of what we're going to talk about is you don't want to end up being in the whole box in the first one at the first horse inspection, or B, not getting to the event, which is that's the main one that happens. You know, the amount of horses that don't make it to their target because things have gone awry along the way as well, and that is a huge part of this, and a huge part of what I wanted to talk about. In that, your journey to badminton really. It's got to start early. Like if you've got 4 and 5 year olds in your stable now and you think that they are of that caliber and that is their purpose in life, well, actually your program for badminton 2028 or 2026 or whenever it's going to be starts now. And in my opinion, and because you don't want to, it's about stress and rest. You know, they've got to work. They've got to get tired like any human athlete. They start young. They start as teenagers. They start younger than teenagers, to be honest. And you've got to get it right. You've got to manage their bodies along the way. So that it's a brilliant topic, and there's a lot to it.
Yeah, and I thought I would start by really emphasizing that fitness to complete the competition, and that's in both a respiratory point of view, so from a heart and lung point of view, but also from the rest of the physical fitness. You know, there are definitely scenarios where you have disappointing situations just before a big competition where problems can arise, and that can be from all kinds of different things. But you end up a little bit, walking along a tightrope. You know, a very fit event horse is very much along a tightrope of either being overfit or fatigued or overtrained, and we might talk a bit about that later, because I think that's a really interesting area to talk about, because it's a huge area in human sports medicine, and I think it's something that is very difficult to really bring into the equine side of it, really, because a lot of it can be quite mental, and it's you can't really well, you can ask a horse how it is today. Do you feel tired? Do you feel overtrained? How do you feel about going up the gallops this morning? But you have to try and get some other information off them, so you don't get into that place. So and as you said already, soundness. Have we got anything limiting our plan for fitness that might be foot problems or back problems or any other things that go along that need support and appropriate management, and also health status. This isn't really I don't want to talk about infectious diseases, but they're out there, whichever country you're in.
A dog got the coronavirus recently.
As long as you haven't got it, Sam, then we're fine.
Yeah, I'm fine, and sure, I'm in a different country. I don't think it transmits through microphones.
I have got a little mask on just in case.
Although I guarantee you there's a rumor out there that it does. That's the world we live in. Interesting. You're touching on you touched on body, you've touched on mind. I talked about my why with my fitness program. My how comes down to how I do it is I want to condition, which is which is the work and the stress element. So I want to condition and manage. So manage is about the rest, sometimes changing things that can help, and then sometimes helping and assisting, which is where you, Mr. Vet, often come in, and Mr. Physio comes in, and all that sort of stuff. So when I'm going to condition and manage the following: the heart and lungs, the body and the mind. So the heart and lungs. So we'll cover all three of these and so talk through them. Heart and lungs is your fitness, and I think one of the easier bits to manage. I would say with this, There's many ways to get a horse fit. I think starting early is key and building slowly. So the earlier you start, the slower you can build. Now, be careful. I don't want the message to be that people are going to start, getting their 3-year-olds and breaking them in and hit, going straight up a mile hill at 600 meters per minute. That's not the thing. It's they've got to be ready they've got to be strong enough to carry weight. So some 3-year-olds might not want a rider of my size on them going up a gallop and what have you. So it's about what the horse is ready for, but you do want to start thinking about it early. Like, I love to see a 4-year-old lobbing away on either round a sand gallop or up a grass hill, or even up and down hills. We'll get into that as well, that they learn to get their balance, not going overly fast, but seeing them breathe, and that when they finish their workout, that rib cage should be panting, and that is all kind of feel based, and you're gonna have probably heard that sort of information before. But what I do now is I start to measure the heart rate, because this is the heart and lung section, and every horse is different when it comes to heart rates. And
okay, well, let me chuck a bit of science at you before we go on to the heart rate stuff, because I do like to feel as though there should be a little bit of a veterinary side of this. So when we're talking about respiration, there's 2 different types of respiration that the cells do. So respiration in the truest sense of the word is using oxygen to produce energy, or essentially producing energy for the muscle to do the job it wants to do. And there's 2 ways that can happen. That's aerobic respiration, which is using oxygen. So that's when, from breathing, we produce the oxygen goes into the bloodstream, and then we are then producing energy for exercise. And then the other way that we do it, or the body does it, is what's called anaerobic respiration. So that's not using oxygen. And that's actually using the energy stores in the horse to produce that energy. Now, that's aerobic respiration is very efficient, produces a lot of energy, but is very much limited by getting the oxygen in. And the anaerobic is very inefficient, but it is there and it is quick to be able to produce. So I look at it and say, well, the aerobic respiration side of it is something that is probably up to a heart rate of about 160. And that is the horse working on stamina. And I think what you're talking about there, of that sort of lower stress exercise or the lower speed exercise, you're developing that ingrained stamina in the horse at that stage. And that's working that aerobic pathway. Getting that heart rate up above 160, that's when you need to start stressing the anaerobic. And that's the sort of getting into the reserves. That's really getting into the guts of it. And that's what you need for the higher level stuff. And that's when you're really working on speed and strength. And if you're getting ready for Badminton or Burley or Bramham, or in fairness, any long 3-star, I think you need to be using both sides of that respiration pathway and tuning them both up. Pop quiz then, Sam, with your heart rates. What is a normal heart rate for a horse?
What, at rest?
Yeah.
In the stable?
Yeah, go on.
Well, I'm going to say it's pretty low, like down around 30.
Yeah. Yeah, no, spot on. And I think, some really fit thoroughbreds will be a little bit less than that, but around 30, give or take. And what's maximum?
210.
Yeah, 210, 220 is maximal heart rate for a horse, which is mental. They are amazingly well developed physiologically to be able to do what we ask them to do, or what they would naturally do in the wild. So it's a huge range, and they can go from such a level of rest to such a high heart rate at maximum intensity. So when we're talking
I'm so glad I've passed the first Spike the Vet pop quiz, and I cannot
he would be
wait.
Struggling here, wouldn't he?
Oh, geez, the numbers could be interesting. I mean,
there will be further quizzes in future podcasts.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear the clips of people being named and shamed. Although I'm not going to count my chickens, because you could well catch me out later on. But it isn't, that range is fascinating. And also that difference, I think that's important for people to get, is that different, the difference between aerobic and anaerobic. And that's in humans as well. I would say, like, high level situation here, folks. If you're tuning into this because you have an interest, I hope we might have some people who might want to train a point to pointer or something in time as well, because that's definitely more that's taking it another level as well, where the fitness is tested probably a little bit further. Although Badminton Burley, particularly when the rain comes, those horses need to be supremely fit. Absolutely supremely fit. And actually, with the type of horse that we've gone to, this would be a bit of a tangent. We're getting more power into our horses with the dressage and show jumping, but we have to get a lot of these horses don't have as much natural galloping ability. So we're actually having to work quite hard to get them fit as well. That brings lots of other issues that I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Yeah, definitely, Sam. That balance, the breeding is really interesting and really important. And if you've got a very thoroughbred horse, with a lot of blood, as people will talk about it in their breeding, they might find that galloping really, really easy. They might kid you though. There's plenty of times when you see, fit thoroughbreds or supposedly naturally fit thoroughbreds as they get termed, getting tired because they do it too easily at home. And you never stress that higher heart rate. They just lob around at 160, 180. You then get to 8 minutes on your first 3-star long. Suddenly there's nothing in the tank because you've just not conditioned that part of it. So there's still challenges there. They can be just as tricky.
I think that once we've we're managing our load and our time, building up that aerobic fitness, spending enough time in those higher heart rate zones to build up the anaerobic fitness, which I think that's where the hill work. And in Ireland, we like our deep Wexford sand. We like to, which horrifies most of in fact, anyone in the sport horse world, pretty horrified by. We literally have. My sand gallop here is I have a 2 furlong circle, which is 400 meters, 16 inches of pure sand, no fiber, and it's the finest sand you'll ever find. So at this time of year, it is so wet that is riding quite quick. Actually, that's like a beach where the tide has literally just gone out, and it's riding really nicely. So that's actually the easy surface to work on, because I have a 5 furlong grass circle, which is a decent hill. It's not a stopping hill, although it pretty much is on ground like today, because it's riding heavy. And I manage that quite carefully. So I've got an inner track that I'm on now for this time of year. So I always, in the summer, my sand dries out, my sand goes very, very deep, and I work slowly on that. And I can work if I need to go up a hill then for shorter, sharper work, and to condition the horse's limbs a little bit to not at full pace, but at maybe kind of 60, 70, 80%, just going up and down that grass hill a little bit, that they learn to, like, that this is the thing that I'm quite strong on is I don't think you're protecting your horse by not working them. I think you've got, because obviously they're not going to get injured if they're not doing much work, but at some point you have to press the button. Like at some point they have to come out of their stable and run, whether it's, even if you choose to just do that 2 times a year, I still think you've got to be the less you've done in preparation for that, I think the more at risk you are on the day. So and yet you can overdo it. I would say that I probably, particularly how Tryon at the World Games in 2018, how that panned out, because we thought South Carolina at that time of year, or North Carolina that time of year, with this hill, we thought, oh, this could be a real test. And a bit like the Brits, so I had this horse so fit, and actually he went round way really within himself, as did Classic Moe, as did Arctic Soul. And I thought, oh my God, I could have easily done 20% less work. And that's hard, that's pain, because you're like, oh, I've used up mileage, and ironically the horse hasn't. He had to miss last season, and he's old now, so he's getting a lot older. So that's the balance. That's the balance. Don't want to do too little, and then the competition they're very sound and healthy, probably fit enough to get through it. Maybe if conditions got tough on the day, they get a bit tired. But if you've underworked them, that's when and under conditioned, that's the key word, because condition brings in the body. Like we've talked about the heart and lungs, they need conditioning, but so do those limbs and joints and stuff, in my opinion, but not overworking. I like that. This is the balance. This is the art.
I think so much of it, Sam, as well, is what you're talking about there is you're asking the right questions of yourself in your training program. What am I trying to achieve here for this horse, for what the challenge that is ahead of it? And for so long, it was, my 2-star horse went twice up the gallops, and my 3-star horse went 3 times up the gallops, and my 4-star horse went 4 times up the gallops, and away we went. And I think it's looking back, and it's getting to a certain level of fitness or a certain level of competition, and analyzing it. And if you don't have that data to start with, and don't have that noted and in exercise programs, then you don't know where you're at. And I mean, I see it the other way. I mean, I do a lot of work with the youth programs, and I think there are overfit horses competing in those levels. And that's potentially not a problem, but it is if you've got a fit horse that's, too sharp in the dressage and it's not settling because it's so fit, and that's a real balance in there. And I think that, what you're saying there about, doing 20% too much work for your WEG horse is fascinating. And, you only know that in hindsight. And that's one of the challenges of a fitness program, is it's until you start doing it, until you've got, where you're at, and you've done a competition, you go, ooh, this was all a bit too easy. Maybe I didn't need to do that many gallops, or I didn't need to be doing it that often or that far. I could have done a bit more dressage. I didn't need to string my horse out and, put the miles on the legs. So the starting point, and I always talk about it, is, just start analyzing, start writing down what an exercise program is. So, if there's people out there that are going, how fit is my horse? Well, write down what it does every day, so how far has it gone? How long have I worked for? What surface was it on? How did it recover afterwards? You can analyze fitness in a very simple way, just as you were saying about breathing. How long does it take for its respiratory rate to come back down to normal? How long until its side isn't heaving? Because you can tell that from sat on top. And that can be a very, maybe sound like a very simple and obvious thing, but if you don't look for it, you won't find it out. And then you need to write it down and have that information so you can look back and go, am I achieving? Do I need to make it better? Or am I finding, is this too easy for the horse I'm doing, at the level it's at?
If you don't record it, what seems so obvious today, obvious today, going, I did 3 laps around the gallop instead of 2, and I just felt it was too much for whatever, and you go to yourself, okay, this horse doesn't need to do 3 or whatever, and you think it's absolute, and I guarantee you in 3 months' time or 6 months' time, you're like, oh, was it this horse or that horse or that? It's you need to record it, and that is what you got to take it from. You're going to learn about fitness, but at some point you want to cross the bridge into understanding. You've got to, like I try and ask questions of myself, not try and stay in the comfort zone, and find out more. Going, is there a better way that I could be doing this? I feel I got it. An interesting horse to talk about would be Imperial Sky in my book. He's a 7/8 brother to Horseware Bushman, who was a horse with a lot of mental and physical toughness. He went inside the time a couple of times around badminton, and he good times. He was a good example of who would be a fast horse with stamina. And he did 3 Europeans, 2 worlds, 4 badminton. So he was very, he had a long career. But we started him early. He did 2 long formats as a 6-year-old, and he actually did 3 as a 7-year-old. The poor fella, he went to Punchestown in a wet year, and then European Championships, and then Le Lyon. But we did plenty with him, and I don't know if it was as a result or whatever, but we were always having to manage his body along the way, and I wondered, did I do too much? But what I always had was, I had a horse who, after that 7-year-old year, when he did at that Punchestown at his first what's now a 3-star long, he got very tired because it was wet and I went out too fast. He got very tired, and he was literally walking. I thought at one point, like, my canter got so slow coming across the finish line. Now, no one made the time. It was very wet, but he got really tired, and he never got tired again in his life, I would have said, even around the wet weg and stuff like that. Now I learned to manage him better, but then I had Imperial Sky, who's a similar horse on paper. And I know that doesn't always mean that they're going. It definitely doesn't mean that they're going to be the same just because they're bred similarly. But that was in the period of my life when I thought, let's save these horses. Let's, what I burn at the beginning, I won't get at the end, was my philosophy. And that's true to an extent if you take that stress to an extreme level, if you go too hard. But I didn't go hard enough, in my opinion, and I didn't get him. I just didn't turn him into an athlete. It would be like me when I came out of college deciding I was going to go and be a athletics athlete. Like, sure, I'd be a disaster. I was drinking beer for 4 years and eating
just the 4
pizza. Yeah. Disaster. I haven't, not playing poker, and when I was doing hardly any exercise. So, I felt I got it wrong with it. And he became a very laid back. So I did loads of dressage with him, and he actually won plenty because he could do a good test, and did plenty of show jumping with him and stuff. But he became a very laid back horse because he never actually got enough adrenaline running through his body and things like that. And now what I have to do to get him into that anaerobic zone is I put Sparks on his back, and I get on another horse and give him I just tell Sparks to count to about 4 after I start cantering, and he's just got to wait, and then he gets about 4 seconds, and I get a 4-second head start, and then I'm off. And he is now starting to understand that game, and his heart rate goes up an extra 15 to 20 beats doing the same, just because now his adrenaline is that, and he's putting the effort in, basically, whereas he wouldn't put.
I thought I'd just say, just in case there's people listening that don't know who Sparks is, you aren't literally putting fire on your horse's back. Sparkles is the nickname for Sam's lovely wife. So that would be one way to make them gallop faster, just actually set fire to their back. But you were talking about things there, changing the intensity of what you're asking them to do. And I think that's a really clever and subtle way of doing it. In more simple terms, I look at 3 key aspects of trying to increase that intensity of the work so that you can get into that higher heart rate, into that higher zone. So you can either go faster. Well, that's not always the easiest thing to do. You can go further. So you've just got to put more miles on the legs, or you've just, got to keep going so that they get to that, over the level of being tired enough to need to get to a heart rate high enough. Or you can go, what I say, steeper. You need to find a steeper hill to go up. Now, not everyone's got, a gallop on their doorstep, or a gallop even within an hour. I remember, I've traveled around the country to various yards here, there, and everywhere, and it can be a real challenge for people to find that, and you talk about trotting up hills, and people are like, I'm in the flat. I don't have anything that's a hill anywhere near me. So you have to find clever ways of trying to make that different. And I think that's interesting what you're saying about, what you use there for Imperial Sky about going faster. Actually having a lead horse can be very effective for that. Particularly if it's, even for, if you've done your first canter, and then for the second time you're going, you've got a lead horse, it's going to just drag you on a little bit quicker. Further is obvious. And steeper I think is a good point. I think, there would be ways of galloping fragile horses, as it were, that might have, leg problems. Well, you don't want to go far. You want to go as short as possible and as intense as possible. You find that steepest hill to canter them up. Now, that ain't easy. You've got to have a good back, and you've got to be comfortable in other areas, and a good strong hind leg, and no lameness problems there. But there's definitely a way of getting these more fragile horses fit. And I think one thing that I was just going to talk on is that there's a lot of use of other ways of getting horses conditioned and fit at the moment. And that is the use of water treadmills or aqua treads, and also using swimming as a way of fitting. Have you used either of those techniques, Sam?
I haven't. The swimming one is interesting. I think there's a bit of an old wives' tale, which might have some sense to it about that, event horses sometimes being funny if they go swimming, about becoming funny about jumping into water. I'm not sure about that, because there's plenty of event horses I know that have swum and they're absolutely fine. But
I do know of one that went swimming and then schooling and just landed badly in the water. But as you say, whether that was just related to the fact that they'd been swimming, but I think it's worth being aware of. It's worth being aware of. You don't want to be swimming your horse that's used to, trotting down walking down into the water there, and you're suddenly, you're jumping over a log into water for the first time, and it's not quite sure how that relates to the swimming it's been doing. But anyway, sorry, carry on, Sam.
It's a different type of breathing. That they do with the swimming is what I've heard. I mean, I've seen it. Like, I've talked to Aidan O'Brien about this, and he says it's very good for maintaining fitness for a period of time, but it's not a tool to use to get a horse fit, if you know what I mean. If you feel that you've got your horse there, and then it's like, he's got to drop, he's pulled a shoe or something like that, I'm going to miss work, then it's good for that. It's good to substitute. Who
am I to disagree with the great Aidan O'Brien? But that is, I have to say, that's something that I've always talked about as well to clients and riders, is that it's not to replace getting them fit, because you don't get that peak heart rate. You just don't. You don't get them up to 200. They sit around 180, and when it starts needing to get to 200, they don't sink. Well, they can sink, but they don't sink as such. But they just get under the waterline and they start breathing in the water. They start finding it difficult, and you don't want to get to that stage because otherwise you can risk colic and things like that afterwards. So, yeah, for me, definitely, if you want to maintain fitness, you've got some ingrained fitness in a horse, and you've got a foot problem or a foot abscess or something that means you've got to take some pressure off their legs. Swimming's a great tool for it. I don't generally like it because it inverts their back.
Yes.
I think it's fine for a racehorse where they don't need to go on the bit. In fairness, not all eventers go on the bit. But anyway, but naturally, I think that they make them go the wrong way. So it's a tool. Whereas the water treadmill, I think, is another tool. I think it's more natural. I love it for strength and conditioning, core strength, self-carriage, working over their back. There's some great studies out. There's a lot of research being done into it at the moment. And I see a lot of social media stuff going around of eventers taking their horse to the new local water treadmill that's popped up around the corner. They're becoming more and more popular. I think I've just seen that Tim and Janelle Price have put one in at their farm. They are a great bit of kit. I wouldn't be advising anyone to think that they can get their horse fit in one. Again, you just don't get a high enough heart rate. But for strength and conditioning, for their core strength, it's brilliant bit of kit. I don't think there's anything comparable, personally.
Yeah, well, I look at water treadmills once a month for sure. As it's really high up on my Christmas. I've tried to write business plans as well, but it's hard to predict exactly how many customers you get through the door. I'm pretty remote here in County Carlow, but no, I would love one of those. And strength and conditioning is massive. So think again, let's use common sense here and look at what humans do. And yes, they run, the runners do run. Of course they do. They do high intensity, shorter, sharper bursts, and they like hills as well, because it puts harder work on the heart and lungs without having to stretch the limbs and the tendons and all that sort of stuff, all those joints and things like that could succumb to injury without having to push them quite as hard. So that's why they like the hill work, but they do, and the fast work. So they're doing that to really put their heart rate up. And then they do their long, slower runs as well. So like a miler, a mile runner who typically runs that now in about, sub 4 minutes now for sure, about 3 minutes 45, I think is about the record. I mean, they go off on 4, 5, 6, 10 mile runs even, and I think you don't get that in racing at all, because it's not very practical, and it's hard it's just practically really hard to do that with a horse. And there are, and the other thing that I would say, there was two things when you were going through your variables, Spike. Willie Mullins would definitely, he doesn't have the option of steeper because he doesn't have the hill, so he says deeper, so he makes his sound gallop deeper. But the new one for me that I think Mickey Young has a little bit bought into the sport. Certainly where I started to really sit up and take note from it is the intensity that you work at in your jumping training, and how long you sustain it, how long you sustain your periods of work. Andrew Nicholson again would be another one. I used to cross country school. I used to pick out 10, 15 fences and go and jump them all because I wanted to jump a ditch, I wanted to jump a skinny, a corner, whatever. Now I'd have that done in about 45 seconds to a minute, and then I'd probably pull up and go and look for another line or something like that. These guys will jump fences for 6 minutes continuously, 6-7 minutes continuously in training. Maybe not at 570, but probably at a much higher intensity. So rather than a fence every 200 to 300 meters, they might end up with a fence every 60, 70, 80 meters on average, and doing that for 6-7 minutes. I mean, they could jump, and I do this now. I could jump 100 jumps in one go. And again, you've got to ensure your ground is safe. I have an area of ground now that no one else is allowed on. And it is just, it's in pristine condition, and I'm not going full pace, but I'm actually, there's a lot of benefits to this. The transitions up and down, changing the pace, that's hard work for a horse. And it does get, and I do this with the heart rate monitor on, and I do get I get the horses. I've had the horse's heart rate up to 200 doing this. Now it is with little bursts here and there as well where I can, but I might only have a burst of like 60, 70 meters, which is like alongside of a dressage arena. But that transition up, down, back, and now I'm really simulating a lot of the things that are mentally tiring for a horse. They've got to jump, a 120 oxer, turn to a skinny, make that effort. Sometimes the stride is they've got to adapt and stuff like that. So this work sustained over 5-6 minutes can get a horse incredibly fit. Now,
I think that's a great point. I think that's a really good point.
You don't want to do it every day because obviously it's harder on them. You got the landings and stuff like that. You don't want to do too many drop bends. Be clever, be smart with reducing, with minimizing the really high risk impact. That's not conditioning a horse. It's actually just stressing. It's actually just risking a horse. But definitely, I think so. In what would that come under? I suppose intensity. I think would be the word.
And you mentioned in there, Sam, you're monitoring your horse's heart rates. Do you clearly have a heart rate monitor? When did you start using that?
I have been playing with heart rate monitors for nearly 3 years, I would say. I went through a year and a half, 2 years of absolute frustration. I come back in and go to upload my actually I started with a watch. I'd actually have it on a watch, and my watch would suddenly drop off, and my heart, the horse, I'd be trotting along and it would start saying 220. I'd be like, oh god. So I'd have to get off, adjust the monitor, then I'd be sort of halfway through the session cantering away, and the connection would drop altogether. They've gotten a lot better. Now is the time to be getting involved because a lot of the learning has happened.
I remember we first started talking about them when you went back to Ireland, having been based in the UK for a few years. And you were sort of talking about, well, how do I know if I'm getting my horses fit at home around these, on these fields or up this gallop or what I'm doing? I said, well, you need to find out. You need to heart rate monitor. You need to start getting some data so you can actually analyze it and know where these horses' heart rates are at, so you can compare it. And I remember us chatting about that. That would be 7-8 years ago now.
Yeah, that is true. I would have had a polar one that long ago. Actually, now that you mention it.
And as you say, the new ones are cool now. And they link to your phone. I don't know what you use, but the polar heart rate monitors are great. They can link through Bluetooth to phones, and then you've got your GPS on your phone, and you can download apps. The best one I've seen is the Kentucky Equine Research one, which is called Clock It. You're then in a position of having your horse's heart rate mapped against speed, distance, all kinds of things. They'll even put it on a little map for you if you need it. And that data is brilliant. It's great to analyze because for me, the real vital stuff, if you're just talking simply again about, doing 2 bits of, two good bits of gallop work over whatever 6 furlongs a mile, that how quickly that heart rate drops in the first minute or two is a very, very strong indication of fitness. And if you are getting up to your heart rate max and it's dropping to about 55% of that within a minute, then you have a fit horse. And that's a pretty fair approximation of where you need to be at. And that's something that you can guide. And I stand at the finish at lots of events, a lot of events in that, that warm down box. And the rider's always really keen to know what's its heart rate, how quickly is that? Is that good? By the time that they have trotted around for 2 minutes, got off, got the tack off, chucked some water on, and you get there with a stethoscope, it's usually about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit less. It's usually about a heart rate of 120. It's already down to that level that it will plateau at for a while. So yes, you get the outliers of the ones that are a bit more cooked and the heart rate's higher than that. But generally speaking, that information's already gone, and you only need to get that from a heart rate monitor, because you can't get a stethoscope onto it quickly enough after you finish. So I would highly recommend those. They're not expensive, and start getting data. And it doesn't have to be your 5-star horse. It doesn't have to be your pointer. You can do it for your novice horse and have a guide. And then, in the following year, when you're stepping up to intermediate, whether it's ready or fit or at the same level you had the previous year. And it's all data. I mean, I don't need to speak to you about data, Sam, but I mean, it's all about getting that info. And speak to your vet. Vets love chatting about stuff like this. It's definitely more interesting than flu vaccinations and foot abscesses anyway. So once you've got some information and some data, there'll be people out there to help you. And that's what I'd really encourage people to do, is start analyzing, start getting some info. And with information, you got some power. And then with power, you can get some more advice and information to base exercise programs on, because you can't just write one down. And that's sometimes the frustration you get asked. I mean, I don't know if you get asked it, Sam, by people you train, but I'd be asked it by people, give me an exercise program. Get me, how do I get my horse fit for Houghton? Well, I can't write it down, because every horse is different. Every gallop is different. Every way you exercise is different. You've got to get some info. You've got to get some data. And then you can be in a position of altering things and then changing things and being able to work forward from there.
Yeah, and fit, how fit is the horse is for this horse, so I mean, that's the great thing about eventing, is we have hopefully a long career with these horses, and I should be able to, there's no reason why I can't tell you at what point Imperial Sky, who I've been riding for 8 years, is now as fit as he's ever been. Do you know? Because I as long as I can, yes, there are variables like ground conditions and stuff like that, but I can do similar work routines and be wary of small samples. So you're best to try and, I mean, I really analyze over a couple of in a fortnight period. Where I want to know, right, do I have this horse? Like, there's a critical 2 weeks for me, which is about 10 days before, which finishes 10 days before a big event. And I will look at that 2 week period where there will be at least 3, and for some horses 4, really good sessions, big sessions of workload. And I can look at their recovery rates, like the routines that they do. Some of them are going to have if they need a change, they get a change. But for a lot of them, like a horse like Art of Highlight, he was the standard one. Him and Bushman would have just done similar stuff. They were so enthusiastic with their work. And it was just, all I had to do was, show them a hill, and like they wanted to go up it as quick. I was just controlling the tempo, going, yeah, now you're doing enough. I never had to ask them to do more, and they always felt very, very good in competition. And actually, it was definitely with them, it's definitely about not doing too much. So but again, I can learn, and I could have, at least now I know when I say I feel like I had him, loads in hand here. So if I want to drop his workload prior to his next championship by 10%, I can do that, because I know what 10% looks like. I can't, if I hadn't been measuring, I wouldn't know what 10% looks like. Where there is still an art is, a good example with Horsewire to highlight was, in that window, I'd say about 3 weeks before WEG, I went out to do, it would have been about 3 miles worth of cantering after, plenty of trotting and warm up and all that, but high tempo, high intensity, 3 mile workout would have been done in 3 sets of a mile. And towards the end of the second one, I just said, no, I'm not doing the third, and that's just feel. I can't, because I felt that his body would, I thought limb wise, but whatever it was, maybe it was just gotten, but I'm still at a point where I go, okay, I feel, even at that point, I thought, look, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have enough in hand with this horse for WEG, and I would rather have 2 time penalties at the end of cross country than push him when I think he doesn't want to be pushed another mile today. I think he feels like he's done enough. That's, from a rider's point of view, that's what's there. That's why Willie Mullins doesn't have heart rate monitors on his horses. I don't think Jesse Harrington doesn't. That's because they don't want to. There's a lot to learn with them, and they've learned their systems for years and years, and they don't want to have to start learning new stuff. I would say to them, there is undoubtedly not just marginal gains, but I think there's serious gains to be made by measuring. But you also have huge amount of variables that they've been managing for years, and to throw another one in there at this point when they really have a good grasp of their current system would be quite a lot for them to adjust to, I think.
Okay, and I'm going to just end with one question that let's turn it back to a little bit more real world, and a question that I get asked a lot, and I know it's out there as well, and I'm going to get your view on it first, Sam. But let's say we've got a rider, they've done a season of novice, let's say, with their horse. They really, but built on some confidence, had some nice results. And they're looking at running in their first long format this spring. And they go, how do I know if my horse is fit enough? What advice would you give to someone in that kind of scenario? I
would say, so they've been running over 5-6 minute courses. And they're only gonna step up by 2 minutes. So if your horse is finishing those, if you're going clear inside the time, and this is a good point as well, in that say they've done 8 novices, for example, I would have said that at least on 4 of those, you want to be running at the same intensity that you want to run your long format at. I think that maybe William Fox-Pitt would disagree with me and say that, I think you only need to do it a couple of times. But then I think possibly with younger horses, he would agree. I'd probably, provided the ground is safe and all that sort of stuff, which is a big if, by the way. I'd want to go more every time there's good ground. I would want to run them at it, because I think you're practicing it. But if they're finishing those rounds quite comfortably, well, you're only putting another 2-3 minutes, 2 minutes probably on top of it, which isn't loads. So you're not far off, I would say. So at that level, you're probably more likely to overtrain than undertrain, I would say, for a 2-star long. And actually, that's that I think is the thing that needs to be addressed in the sport right now. If we go bigger issue eventing, I don't think our 2-star longs are preparing 6-year-olds to be future 5-star horses. I don't think they're having to do enough. But use that to your advantage if you're particularly a younger rider, and you don't have aspirations of doing 5-star or 4-star longs, then you're doing plenty. What do you want to practice? I think you just got to make sure that your horse, after his workouts, has been tired, I would say 4 or 5 times, but not in the last 2 weeks of work. So you've just got to, like Eddie Jones, and England rugby coach, would say, you're not training if you're not pushing the comfort zone. Don't push the comfort zone every day, but you do need to push the comfort zone 4 or 5 times. I would, the heart rate monitors aren't that expensive, and there's loads of them out there. So that's time spent in that anaerobic zone. But start off, you're going to start off being governed by your feel. So you're going to say, right, I'm going to use a hill today, or I'm going to use, that is your best bet, to be honest, your hill, to get that heart rate up, because you can go faster. It takes the weight off the front legs. It's the safest way to really work them. And just feel that, I can feel my horse is tired for the first time. Yeah, he's finding this harder work than what he's finding around his 1 days. And now you're pushing the comfort zone a little bit. Don't get him absolutely exhausted. Just get him a little bit more tired, and then you know where the line is. And then just try and push that. Just, I would say 5 sessions is gonna. If this is a horse who's already competing at novice level, so I'm talking about 5 workouts where you feel you've just pushed it a little bit further each time, and small incremental pushes. And I would be hugely surprised if you didn't feel you had your horse fit enough. And I think what you will be doing is you will be finishing your long format with a horse who's comfortable, with a horse who recovers well. And the question you'll probably be answering yourself is, could I have done a little bit less?
Yeah, I would endorse all of those. Amazing how we sing off the same hymn sheet, isn't it, Sam? But I tell you what I would add to that, because I think Sam talks about a few things in there about feel, and getting that kind of. It's difficult to really put into words, trying to say, you'll feel your horse tired, or you'll feel like that. I try and be a little bit more analytical in my advice and say things like, well, I would measure out a distance, and then I would wear my stopwatch, and I would say time how long that takes for a set distance. And then I could time how long the recovery is to the respiratory rate back down to normal. And then you can use things like that as a guide. And you don't have to do, that sounds silly, but so many people have got the wheels that they go wheeling their cross-country course, wheel the length of a field. And then you can work out your time. You don't necessarily need a heart rate monitor and an app to tell you those sort of things. You can do it with your cross-country watch, and you can then, and then you'll know what tired feels like, because you'll know it is, because you've done it faster than you've ever done it before. Or the next time you've done it at exactly the same time as you did it 2 weeks ago, and the horse is recovering quicker. And then you can start putting together things that are really nice numbers to what you're seeing and feeling with your horse. So first off, if you're asking those questions of yourself and your horse at this stage, you're asking the right questions, which is definitely the best starting point to be at. But try and get some information to so that what you're feeling and what your understanding of what your horse is doing can actually match to something that can be a number or a little bit of data. And we're not all mathematicians like Sam, but it is much easier to have some data and have some numbers to go with, rather than just assuming or hoping or thinking that you should have this feel. Because Sam, in fairness, Sam, you've been an elite eventer for what, 15 years? You've been doing it for a little while now, and
an elite eventer. I did 15 minutes or 15 seconds since you've just crowned me that. But no, we drop names into this. We drop names into this podcast. The William Fox Pitts, the Andrew Nicholson, Michael Young, people like that. But not everyone's like that. And if we can bring that, talk about what people can do day to day with their horses to be able to go and achieve, and to go inside the time at a 2-star long, that can be a great achievement for them, and do that in a safe way without having to have your horse overfit, or fatigued. And I think that's a perfectly achievable thing with just getting some data as part of your training program. Yeah, and it can be done anywhere. So the when you're learning at the Spark, great point about the stopwatch. I trained with a big yellow stopwatch on my wrist so I could see everything. I did all my canter work from 2002 to 2009 with that big clumpy stopwatch on to really learn and get feedback. Feedback is you can't learn without digesting the information that you've just from the experiences you've just had. So you need to get feedback. You're getting feedback from the horse, but you're getting feedback as well, from how long it took to do that distance, etc. And then when I started going over to the UK around 2009, 2012, there was 4 seasons there where I'd leave Ireland every February and not come back till October. And I got horses fit in the strangest places, I couldn't, I was in different, I was a traveler. I was an Irish traveler in the UK going around in a blue lorry that used to run out of diesel on hills because all the diesel go to the back of the tank. My horses were fitter than my truck was. But I found a steep hill, drive into one of my yards when I was down in Salisbury. I was like, this would be good to canter on. And it was, It took me about 50 minutes to hack there. And like in the summer, it used to grow up the wheat. Your man would never cut his headland. So like I was cantering through probably 4 foot of grass. Like 4 foot's a lot. It's about the height of my wife. And I think she's actually taller than that. I think she's about 5 something.
Yeah, it's not as big as your ego, though, in fairness.
No, that's true. So like that was just literally a random hill that I had driven up and thought that would be good. And okay, I knew it was. I went and walked it and everything to make sure it was safe. But it's on. Now that was to go clear. That like I went clear inside the time around badminton off that. So it can be done at any level, anywhere. Obviously, try and minimize your risk and stuff, but think outside the box and do you know what? Enjoy it. That if you study it, try and understand it, and then it is great fun. I love the topic. I love this managing it, getting that feedback off my horses. Like I was cantering them today, trying that new thing with well, it's not that new, but it's a tactic we use with Imperial Sky that he's got a weight. I mean, he was pawing the ground when he finished cantering today because he wanted to go, like we've changed his attitude to work so much, and it's cool. It's a fascinating and really, really enjoyable area.
So there we go, guys. Think outside the box and enjoy it. Those 3 good bits of advice there. So look, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Sam, huge thank you for coming on the first whole box. I hope you've enjoyed your time in the whole box this time rather than any other previous stressful moments. I hope everyone's enjoyed listening to it. Really appreciate feedback, potential other topics that we can cover. I'm going to be calling in a few favors from various colleagues and equestrian friends about other subjects that we can talk on. And look forward to where we can go with this in the future. So thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to the EquiRatings Eventing podcast. This podcast is available for free on iTunes, Spotify, Podcast Addict, or wherever you usually listen to your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. Find us at eventingpodcast.com or search Eventing Podcast on social media.